The following is a 360-degree video with controls in the top of the screen that allow viewing of both the stage and the audience. Rooted in Rights presents at Women Marching Forward 2018. Impact Hub, Seattle, Washington, January 21st, 2018. 3 people settle into chairs on the small stage. The woman in the center has set her white cane on the floor. On various screens both behind the presenters and above the audience, members of the Rooted in Rights team join via video chat. To the left of the stage, a sign language interpreter faces the audience of approximately 50 who are sitting in rows of chairs. Some move about the room taking photos.
Thank you, folks. So, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My name is Jordan. I'm the program director at Rooted in Rights. We're a video and social media advocacy program dedicated exclusively to disability rights issues. We're based at Disability Rights Washington, which is just down the street this way is where the office is in the International District. And then over here in the other room, Disability Rights Washington has a table set up for some of the advocacy work campaigns they're doing right now. So after this, if you have a moment, please stop by and say hello. For Rooted in Rights, as I mentioned, our focus is video and social media. Our mission is to tell authentic, accessible stories that empowers our community to advocate for disability rights. You should memorize that by now, but it's cheap. We also provide a platform for our communities to tell their own stories, and we'll be talking a lot about that today. Our issues are local, national, and international, and that's why you'll see some folks are joining us by video chat today from around the country who work in our team. The rest of our panel, these are all folks who work on the team, and I'm honored, blessed to work with them every single day. I cannot wait to introduce them to you. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We are going to be playing a couple of videos throughout our program today. If you're just joining us, these will appear on the screen behind us. They will also be on the video screens out in the audience. The videos are both open captioned and audio described. And if you have any questions about how that works, we're going to get into that in a little bit as part of the presentation. So now I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves, and we'll get going. So I'm going to start directly to my left with Courtney.
Hi everyone, my name is Courtney Cole. I'm a creative production assistant at Rooted in Rights, and I've been with Rooted in Rights for about a year now.
My name is Rachel Mizaki. I'm also a creative production assistant, and I just started in December, so I'm pretty new. Kiki, did you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Kiki Robledo, and I am the Storytellers Coordinator at Rooted in Rights, and I've been working for Rooted in Rights for almost 3 years, so it's been a while, been a great ride. And I am coming to you live from Houston, Texas. And Vanessa?
Hi, I'm Vanessa Link. I live on Whidbey Island. I'm a creative production intern for Rooted in Rights. I've been doing that for just over a year, and I work on graphic design projects that promote disability rights. Emma?
Hi, my name is Emily Leno. I'm coming to you from Long Island, New York, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Rooted in Rights blog.
Great. So we're going to go ahead and watch a video now, and then we'll come back to chat for a little bit. Once we're done with the videos and the chatting, we're going to leave some time for all of you. So if you have questions, please keep them handy to the end, and we'll get to you at that time. Thank you very much.
Dr. Jen Arnold.
So I think it's really tough to be a little person in the job force.
Jen, that one can I help you?
I think it's important for, the LP community as a whole to really undervalue our capabilities and the things that we can do with our careers.
Hi, my name is Cookies Robledo, and today I want to talk about an issue that is very personal to me. As you may have noticed, I am a little person. Specifically, I have spondyloepimetaphyseal dysplasia, otherwise known as SEMD for short. Because of our short stature, some little people are sometimes stuck in jobs that reflect our short size predominantly. These include jobs such as Kristen Mall or entertainers who are often perceived as sexualized microversions of famous celebrities, such as Lady Gaga or Mini Britney Spears. Now, I'm not saying that taking these jobs is a bad thing, but rather we can have any job in the world, and we do not have to settle. Recently, I had the opportunity to speak with the stars of TLC's The Little Couple and get their thoughts on the challenges little people face in the workforce.
My name is Bill Klein. I am an entrepreneur.
My name is Jennifer Arnold, and I am a neonatologist, but I'm also a simulation educator, and so as a physician, I primarily do education.
Yeah, there's a lot of labeling that goes on that takes our stature and puts us into a bucket of you can either be in entertainment or you shouldn't be doing work. Jen.
So when I was a training staff for volunteering in the ER, I was checking in on a couple, older couple, and they said to me, "You're working here?" I said, "Yeah, I'm volunteering this summer and planning to go to medical school." And they said, "Oh, why would you go to medical school?" I said, "Well, I want to become a doctor." And they said, "Well, don't you juggle or play the piano or, do some type of entertainment?" And I was like, no.
Yeah.
Why?
So you're not a good joker.
No.
Graduated writing with a degree in biology. I went out to the workforce and started applying for jobs. There was a lot of resistance, both because my appearance wasn't what they were looking for, and I wasn't prepared. I would say that the first thing you need to do is know that you have value that you're bringing to your prospective employer. The second thing is you need to address it if people are being shy. You need to outwardly address the concern that they might have. It's not an obligation, but I think it's something that helps you be more productive so that you can take that issue, disarm them, and move on.
There is more awareness out there. However, that does not mean that little people are necessarily treated equally in the workforce. We still have a long way to go. Whether a little person is a student like myself, a neonatologist, a TV star, a business person, a lawyer, or even a stay-at-home parent, we all have something in common. We deserve the right and equal opportunity to work hard for the job that we deserve.
Written and directed by the Visual Brothers. Thanks to Bill and Jen.
Okay, some cookies if you're with us. Okay, great. Why don't you start talking about why did you choose this subject to make this video?
Yeah, so, one of the obvious reasons, I am a little person, and when I was making the video, I was just almost out of college. So when I was about to go into the workforce myself, and as well, I've known Jen and Bill for a really long time now, and one of the reasons why I wanted to interview them specifically was because they're very successful people. I know they've gone through ups and downs and trying to find, to get to where, they are today. Jen's a successful doctor, Bill is a successful businessman, and I wanted to know and get to know more insight on tips on if in the future, if I or anyone who's a little person or anyone who has a disability needs to go in the workforce, like what are some good ways to, show that, I have the right to any job. And I wanted to get their perspective on this issue as well.
Great. So employment is something we talk about quite a bit in our work at Rooted in Rights. Can you just go over some of the barriers people with disabilities sometimes face when trying to get a job or even after they get a job?
Yeah. Well, I know we've also talked about this issue a lot, the issue of sub-minimum wage and how people with disabilities, if they are in the workforce, some companies will pay them less than minimum wage because of this perception of, they're not capable of doing X amount of work or that they're lazy, but, that's just wrong to begin with that perception. If we're looking specifically at, little people in the workforce, there's this misconception of size. Like, for instance, I'm 3 feet, 1.5 inches tall, so, doing anything that's like labor-intensive or, reaching things, is sometimes a challenge. So there's this perception of, just because you're short in stature, you're not going to amount to anything great. You're not going to amount to actually, doing the job at full capacity. So, why bother even giving you the shot? But I think it's important that we go out there and show, through videos like this that, hey, look at us, we may be small, we may have a disability, but we have every right in the world to get a job, to prove to people that we can be successful people in life.
Great. And so we did this video, and I don't actually know if you know this, Cookies, but you said you were going to do this video, but you didn't tell me about Bill and Jen, and then you sent your footage in, and you have these great like TV stars in your movie. We weren't expecting it. So we looked at this, and then how did this then turn into the Storyteller series? And can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so when I first did this video, I was actually, I was still at school. I had this idea in mind, and this was after I worked with Womxn Rights for, this was back in 2016. I had finished working there for the summer, and I talked to Jordan and I said, hey, I would like to do more videos, and I have this story I'd like to, try out. So Jordan said, okay. He sent me a template on how to write a script, so I wrote my script remotely. We communicated back and forth via email, web chat. I filmed the video on my own, and then they did all the editing in-house, and then we realized that if I'm someone who has a disability, who's making videos remotely, other people with disabilities probably have stories that they want to share, issues that they want to share, but they may not necessarily be remote. They may be from other parts of the country. They may be from other parts of the world. And so we came up with the Storyteller series, where, as the coordinator, I teach people with disabilities how to write their own script. I train them. We have a video kit that includes an iPhone, a camera phone, a tripod, headphones, microphone, and we send them, we ship it out to our storytellers, and I teach them via video chat how to use the equipment to make their own videos. And then they send the footage in, and they explain how they want the video to be formatted, how they want it to be edited, and then we do the editing for them with, we communicate back and forth, and they give us feedback on how they want it to look with graphics and animation. And the reason why the series is important is because, a lot of people, when they advocate for people with disabilities, it's usually able-bodied people that are telling the stories of people with disabilities. But this series is different because people with disabilities that are in control and sharing their own stories, and they're the ones telling their authentic narrative. And that's important because, we're the ones that have to go through these challenges, these obstacles on a day-to-day basis. So, who better than to share their story, than to talk about this issue, than the person that's actually dealing with these issues on a regular day basis.
That's great. And we're going to hear that theme come up again and again as we go through the program today. You're going to see 2 more of those Storyteller videos. So, Cookies, before we move on, if people want to support the Storyteller series, where can they go?
Well, you can go to rootedinrights.org. We have a whole bunch of videos out there that we have about, I have about 11 storytellers, and this program's been going on for about 2 years. And then also we have a Patreon page where you can support the storytellers. It's patreon.com/RIR storytellers. And basically, making a storyteller's video is not cheap. And so any support that you can give will help our storytellers produce films, and you can get behind-the-scenes footage of what goes into making these videos. So it's patreon.com/RIR storytellers if you're interested in supporting our series.
Well, thank you. We could talk to any one of these folks forever. We are going to move on. We're going to watch the second video now.
Should students have to choose between academics and independence? Blind students have to.
Hi, my name is Courtney Cole, and I'm a college student from Seattle, Washington.
Courtney uses her white cane to travel around her college campus.
In Washington State, blind students have the option to attend their local public school or to attend the Washington State School for the Blind, WSSB, located in Vancouver, Washington.
Photo of the large brick school.
WSSB is a public school that is free to attend if your application is accepted, and serves legally blind students in Washington State. Living in on-site dormitories, students are immersed in a community of peers and mentors with similar experiences. Students are able to receive instruction in Braille, orientation and mobility, and other everyday skills that are necessary to living an independent life as a blind person. However, while there are many opportunities for blindness training at WSSB, it lacks academic opportunities, such as advanced placement courses.
I spoke with Josiah Sanchez, who attended both WSSB and public school, to get some insight on the issue.
I go to Womxn University, majoring in criminal science. There's definitely an obvious difference between the speed and intensity of academics. There are definitely some classes that I feel did prepare me, but their science and mathematics curriculum, I wouldn't say prepared me for what I might encounter in university.
In addition, the segregated nature of WSSB means that students are often missing out on exposure to the community at large, which is essential to developing important social skills.
Flows of students interacting.
Since WSSB has only one location, it's also a possibility that students can be far from home and their families. Public school is the alternative to state schools for the blind. In a public school setting, blind students must be proactive about advocating for their needs, which can be positive for building self-confidence. But the public school system can be full of red tape, which makes it difficult for blind students to get the equipment and accommodations that they need.
Red tape comes to screen and pulls away to reveal desire.
If public schools did have the education and were able to provide these accommodations, then I think that having a separate school wouldn't be necessary. Some public schools don't have the right accommodations or aren't able to or aren't educated on how to accommodate properly.
We are forced to choose between independent skills and academic opportunity, a decision that able-bodied students never have to make.
Courtney walks on campus and smiles.
You have the right to a free, appropriate public education, written and directed by Courtney Cole. Special thanks to Josiah Sanchez, Abby Cole, and Seattle University.
So that short video was directed by Courtney, who's to my left. Courtney, how many videos have you made? Have you directed?
That would be the only one. The first one.
So why did you choose this for your very first video?
So I was actually introduced to this topic in 2015 when I attended a camp for blind and visually impaired students here in Seattle. And it just really struck me the difference between the experience of someone like me who went to public school their entire life and some of the other campers who had gone to the school for blind for their entire life. And I also met Josiah, and he really discussed with me the difference in having experienced both schools. And that's definitely something that stuck with me for a long time. So when I came to Rooted in Rights and realized that, hey, I have this ability to tell stories about things that are important to me, I really wanted to talk about this issue.
Great. And so we put it out a few months ago now, right? What's the reaction been like online?
So since this was my first film, I really didn't know what to expect, putting it out online to our thousands and thousands of viewers. And the response I got was very mixed on this particular video. And, you know, people in the blindness community are often divided on a wide variety of issues. But what I found was I actually got some really negative responses from people within my community. And at first, I was kind of worried about that. I was concerned. I was like, oh, people don't like my video. But I came to realize that the reality of when you're making this kind of content is that one of the best things that can happen is to get negative responses from people, because that means that you're making people think about these issues and start a conversation. And so that honestly became one of the things I was proudest of about this video.
So when you say negative feedback, what do you mean? They disagreed with your premise in the video?
Yeah, so there are people who just really stand behind School for the Blind and what it's doing, and believe that there are very solid reasons for it to exist, whereas I really believe that if a public school could do their job in accommodating that there would be no need to separate students based on their disability, and really behind all of that, I believe that it violates the rights of students with disabilities to separate them for that reason.
So before we let you go, I do want to talk a little bit more about some of the work you do with us. So can you describe just your kind of day-to-day at Rooted in Rights, and also tell us a little bit about how our audio description process works?
Yeah, sure. So being a creative production assistant basically means that I don't have one job, I have about 16. And so on day-to-day, I do anything from editing. I'm working on a little bit of promotional material. I work on some administrative tasks that just keep the day-to-day running. But one thing that specifically I work a lot on is audio description. And it's something that a lot of people don't really know about because it's not widely implemented in film yet. But it's something that's super important. What it actually is a verbal description of what's going on visually in the film or video that you probably heard when you were listening to my video. And it allows for people who can't experience content visually or have limited ability to experience content visually to get the sense of the media. And it runs right alongside captions with being something that's so important and essential for people to be able to experience the media. And so I work really hard on creating scripts and voice recording, audio description, and working to make it better and better and implement it in a way that is natural and that's ingrained in the media as kind of a creative addition rather than something that's tacked on at the end of the afterthought.
And how many of the videos have you audio described?
Many. Many. If you go to rootedinrights.org and watch a lot of our content, you'll hear my voice in the background explaining what's going on. And so that's what that is, and something I'm really dedicated to at Rooted in Rights, and something that we do that's very unique, I think.
If you guys want to learn more about it, we'll be here afterwards to chat with you. And you should definitely chat with Courtney, who's probably one of the experts in the country right now on doing this specifically for social media, which is very cool. And if you want to learn more about it too, if you have Netflix, a lot of Netflix movies now are adding audio description. You can actually turn that on through your app if you want to hear more, a different way of going about it. All right, like I said, I get to talk to Courtney forever, so we're going to move on. We're going to show our third film right now.
Hi, my name is Emily Liddell, and I'm a Rooted in Rights storyteller.
Emily drives her wheelchair in front of the U.S. Capitol.
This election, disability rights activists are working hard to bring disability issues into the spotlight. Our position is simple. Disability rights are human rights. And since, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, nearly 1 in 5 Americans have a disability, we want both campaigns and the public to take notice. And it seems that candidates are taking notice, thanks to strong advocacy initiatives like the nonpartisan Grip the Vote, a campaign to bring disability rights issues into the spotlight this election. But the question is, are people recognizing disability as a key election issue in an exploitative way or a substantive way? Take, for example, the issue of Donald Trump mocking the disabled reporter.
A clip of Donald Trump from CNN. He's got, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
That incident brought disability some of the most attention that it's received this entire election. And that should be a good thing, right? Well, it wasn't necessarily the kind of attention that disability advocates are hoping to receive. Donald Trump's rebuttal to the issue made out disabled people to be a charity. His response? Who would do that to the handicapped? I've spent lots of money making buildings accessible. Well, let me tell you, Donald Trump, there's more to disability rights than making buildings accessible. And then there's Grace.
They clip from Grace, a political ad from Priorities USA Action, a growth and super PAC.
This ad features parents of a young girl with spina bifida talking about Donald Trump's mocking behavior and how much it shocks them.
The children at Grace's school all know never to mock her. And so for an adult to mock someone with a disability is shocking.
And sure, it's never okay to mock someone with a disability, but is it okay to use someone with a disability to tug at the heartstrings of voters? And where was the voice of someone who has a disability? Then there's Dante.
Another political ad from Priorities USA Action, featuring a 17-year-old boy.
When I was 1 year old, I was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer on my spinal cord. But I spent my whole life fighting back.
Dante watches a clip of Donald Trump on TV. Emily.
This ad features a disabled person expressing their disgust at Donald Trump mocking people with disabilities. And this is exactly how it should be. A disabled person speaking up for themselves. But again, the problem is, where is the discussion about actual policy issues, and why is disability being used to tug at voter heartstrings?
A clip of Dante showing tattooed forearms that went together read cancer survivor. Grace sits in her wheelchair, arms raised and smiling. Grace in her wheelchair holding hands with another young girl wearing roller skates.
There's a big difference between using disability to play to voters' emotions and talking about the very real concerns and experiences that people with disabilities face every single day. So it's time for the candidates to go deeper, much deeper. I'm talking about employment opportunities, affordable and accessible housing, healthcare and insurance coverage, social security, inclusive education. The list goes on and on. It's time to recognize, no matter what your political views are, that the disability community, which makes up the world's largest, most diverse minority, and 1/5 of the population of America, has a right to representation in this election. Written and directed by Emily Liddell.
So a little flashback to 2016. Not my favorite year. I'm sure not many of your favorite years either. So Emily, do you think political messaging has changed since 2016?
Yes and no. I would say that it's been an issue that is getting more attention, but not always the right attention. So disabled people are often represented in the media as objects of inspiration or pity, or the overcomer or the victim. I wonder if anybody in the room is familiar with the term inspiration porn. And I usually get a little bit of a shock value response when I use the word inspiration porn. But the reason that it's called that is because porn, in some manifestations, objectifies the people who are in it. And so inspiration porn is the objectification of somebody with a disability for the sake of your own warm, fuzzy emotions. It evokes some kind of emotion in you. And so I'm sure you've all seen and perhaps even shared something on your Facebook timeline to the effect of, the only disability in life is a bad attitude, with a little kid who maybe has a prosthetic leg running along a track or something like that. And so that would be inspiration porn, because you're supposed to be inspired by the kid and you're supposed to be inspired to persevere, because whatever problems you're having can't possibly be as bad as the problems that this little kid with a disability is having. So that's a pretty common media trope, as is, like I mentioned before, pity, or being the overcomer or the victim. So there are some very stereotypical narratives with disability. And when it comes to the incident of Trump mocking the disabled reporter, people treated this like it was the most egregious thing he had done. So he could say whatever he wanted, but he lost people when he mocked somebody with a disability. That was the line. And the media latched onto that. And even a year plus into his presidency now, people are still hearkening back to it. You know, it's always, you know, he can say all these horrible things, but no, disability is untouchable. And this points to a larger issue around media representation and coverage of disability, which is that disabled people need more substantive coverage and more substantive political messaging. So we saw a lot of this happen during the fight to prevent the repeal of Obamacare, where reporters were actually addressing the issues at hand. But there were also a bunch of people who were like, oh my God, how dare you drag those poor disabled people out of the building for protesting? How low can you get? And the focus ended up on those poor disabled people instead of on those empowered activists. And so we really need to shift away from either putting disabled people on a pedestal or seeing them as fragile and untouchable. And we need to start recognizing that disabled people are humans whose basic rights are essentially being stripped away by the current administration one day at a time. We need to remember to keep the focus on those really substantive issues in order to actually make a change.
So, for the folks in this room are advocates, I'm sure, of different flavors. How can they avoid inspiration porn? Creating it, sharing it, accidentally doing it, or anything else, not just inspiration porn. But how can they basically authentically communicate on these issues?
So there is a saying when it comes to the disability rights movement called nothing about it, or the saying goes, nothing about us without us. And put simply, that means if you're talking about disability issues, then disabled people need to be at the table. And not only do they need to be at the table, they need to be at the head of the table. And I think that something that very well-meaning people who identify themselves as allies of the disability community often forget is that in order to truly be an ally, you have to know when we need to step back and amplify the voices of people who are actually disabled rather than speaking for us. And this happens much more often than you think. The assumptions that the disability community is incapable of speaking up for ourselves in whatever way we choose to communicate or can communicate. And so I ask people to remember very simply that authenticity and genuine, respectful coverage of disability stems from inclusion. And that means including the disability community in all that you do, and then going a step further than that, and not just including us, but making sure that our voices are centered in the conversations about our issues.
Great. Well, that leads us, the next thing I'd like you to talk about, which is the blog. Can you talk about the work that you do in the blog and how we try to practice what we preach with that project?
Yeah, so the Rooted in Rights blog is a platform where people who identify as disabled can share their stories and get their narratives out there into the world. So they talk about a personal experience that's rooted in a more deeply focused disability rights issue. And a top priority for me as editor-in-chief of the blog is ensuring that our representation is intersectional. So while we welcome disabled people to write for us, we highly value people who not only identify as disabled, but also have other multiple marginalized identities as part of them, sharing their stories. So we don't just want to talk about disability as though it exists in a vacuum or a bubble. We want people to realize that disability is something that can intertwine with any other identity. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you are, disability can touch your life at any time. And I say that not as a threat, even though it can sound scary to people who are not disabled, but to recognize that disability is really something that can become intrinsically part of anybody's life. And we need to recognize it as an identity and not just as a negative or something that we stigmatize. And this is especially important for people with multiple marginalized identities. So if you're disabled and you are a Black person, or if you're disabled and you are queer or trans, those are the stories that we really need to hear, because those are the stories that we're not hearing at all. Right now, coverage of disability in mainstream media is often very surface level, often focused on telling the story of the white, cis, heterosexual, disabled person. I mean, we need to move away from that. We need to be talking about people with multiple marginalized identities. And not only do we need to be talking about it, but we need to be letting them tell their own story. And so that's what the Rooted in Rights blog does. And if I may be so bold as to make a pitch for people to make pitches to me, it's very easy. You just go to rootedinrights.com/blog. Or actually, I believe it's a little bit more of a URL than that. I don't want to get the wrong one. So since I happen to have the benefit of being in front of my computer, it's rootedinrights.org/about/submit a blog idea, or you can just go to our homepage, click on blog, and then click on submit a blog idea from the drop-down menu. We are looking for disabled people with multiple marginalized identities, and I really encourage people to remember that this does not just mean physical disability. This can be mental health disabilities, chronic illnesses, because we take back our power by telling our stories.
Hearing you say that out loud, we got to fix that on the website, I think, to make that a little easier. Before we let you go, and of the people on the panel today, I think you probably spend the most time traveling in social media, both with working with Rooted in Rights and elsewhere. Have you encountered, or I should say, I know you have, how do you handle it when you get trolled on Twitter, Facebook, when you post your blog posts when those issues are out there?
I encounter trolls quite a bit, but I actually wanted to note that it's not always so much trolls that I encounter, but actually people who genuinely think that they know better than I do when it comes to my thoughts, feelings, opinions, experiences around disability. So more often than not, it's really not trolls that are the problem. Of course, there are people who have trolled me, and it's difficult to hear. You know, for example, I tweet something advocating for something connected to receiving Social Security disability benefits. And when you know that something like that is at risk, or when you know that Medicaid is at risk, I get tweets from people saying, oh, so you have to earn your keep now, that's why you're upset. And that's a really difficult thing to hear, but I've decided that I try to meet people with facts and not with anger. And that seems to be the best way to head off trolls, because trolls are looking to get a rise out of you, and when they don't, and they see that you're providing measured responses, that often defeats the purpose of what they were trying to do in the first place. So I try to take the higher road there, but it's more difficult when it's people who genuinely have no respect for the fact that I'm a disabled person, and my opinions may not always be bright, sunny, and warm and fuzzy, hence the inspiration narrative of disability. And I've been called bitter. I've been told that I'm wrong for how I identify myself by saying disabled woman. I've been told that I don't know what I'm talking about, that my research or my facts are incorrect, or even just that my opinion is wrong. And so in that case, I try to not just meet people with facts, but to meet people where they are, and to try to find a ground upon which we can have a dialogue, and hopefully I can ask them to broaden their perspective. But if that doesn't happen, then the best thing to do is just know when to disengage and when to take care of yourself. My ultimate goal is to change one mind at a time, and if I'm not going to change your mind today, then, you know, there's somebody else's mind out there that needs changing when it comes to their perspective on disability. So you have to know when to let go and take care of yourself, ultimately.
Great. So now we're going to turn our attention to Vanessa. Vanessa has not made a film with us yet. I say yet, Vanessa. But you have worked on another really important project, so I'm going to ask you a little bit about the work you've been doing on the discussion guides and the feature films that we put out.
Right. So, one of my latest projects that I'm working on, as Jordan mentioned, is the discussion guides for two of our documentaries on the outs and the right to be rescued. And that is basically providing viewers with some more information to promote discussion after they see the film, and that it reinterprets the work to make it more relevant, even after the films have been showed and viewed a few times, since there's some written questions and prompts about it, people continue to think about it and discuss it.
Can you tell us a little bit about the two projects you're working on? What are the films about?
So, the right to be rescued is about how during Hurricane Katrina, mainly, many people with disabilities were left behind and were not rescued, and it describes the importance of including disabled people in evacuation plans for disasters, natural disasters, mainly hurricanes, because Hurricane Katrina was the focus of the film, but it also needs to happen for other natural disasters. In any evacuation and disaster plan, disabled people need to be included. And on the out is a documentary that follows 3 inmates with disabilities and their re-entry process back into society, and how successful, or in their case, not successful the process was, and how it is affected, how the re-entry process is influenced by whether or not someone has a disability.
Great. Well, we have some time left over now, so we're going to throw it out to you. If you guys have questions or comments, Rachel is going to be around with the mic. Please wait for the microphone before you start your question. So, who's first? Who has a question? Somebody right here?
I had a question for Courtney about the audio description. Do you think that would ever be implemented in movie theaters and things where major films are playing? The same where they might usually choose on films that are in major theaters or maybe motion films. Do you think that would be something that could happen in the future that would be important?
Shai, could you do it, or just for Courtney or for Cookie?
That's for Courtney.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know that it depends on where you are, right? Some theaters have the option to have audio description. They have a track. You can have your own headphones and it will play just for you during the film. But like I said, when I think about audio description, I want to implement it in the most natural way. And I hope that eventually that it will just be a part of all media. So that everyone can experience it together at the same time without having to have a set of headphones or separate you from the other people that you're experiencing the media with, right? Because really when you're watching a film or a video, you're watching it with other people a lot of the time. And you want to be a part of that experience and not be separate. So I know that there's the option. It's starting to be more available in movie theaters, and I hope that eventually it's just a given, and that's how films are watched by everyone.
If I'm not mistaken, exhibitors, so meaning movie theaters, are now required to provide that service if the film comes with audio description. What we're missing right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, the content producers themselves are not required to create it. So they can use it if they have it, but the film studios and et cetera, may not be producing it in the first place. So that's something that we need to work on.
I actually have 2 questions. The first one is, does anybody know if there are bills in Washington right now that we can learn about and support disability rights?
Yes.
Both Washingtons.
Well, let me start by saying, if you want to get involved in disability rights, you can do so today, right next door. Disability Rights Washington is working on a campaign to close down the Rainier School, which is a developmental disability institution in Washington State. If you have been watching any of the local news, you know about the neglect and abuse that's been going on there for years and years and years and years. And we think it's time for it to change. So if you want to get involved today, you can do that right now, and that can have an effect right here in Washington State. On the federal level, there's a ton. Up first is something we were just working on, is a bill that's in the House right now. I don't remember the long title of it. The number is 4547, and that has to do with regulation of Social Security representative payees, which are individuals that manage benefits for people who can't manage money on their own. This is another system rife with abuse, and this bill would help hopefully provide more oversight on it by giving that oversight ability to organizations like Disability Rights Washington. So that's a good one. There's also bills you can keep an eye on for the other reason. HR 620, is that the number? HR 620 is a bill that is being advanced that would water down and destroy certain protections from the ADA, basically creating even more barriers to the ability to be successful in other important accommodations. So we wanted to stop that one. I think DC is a little distracted at the moment, but they will get back to it eventually, and we need to be prepared for it. And then the last one I'll mention, particularly close to my heart, is something called the Time Act in the House of Representatives, and that act would eliminate the sub-minimum wage completely. And then there's another one in the Senate called Raise the Wage, which would raise the minimum wage for everybody and then finally phase out the sub-minimum wage. I saw Clark's hand about to go up, and he's going to remind me of one or two.
Disability Integration Act.
And then the most important one, the Disability Integration Act, which is the missing piece of the ADA. And that would basically codify in law the ability for people with disabilities to live where they want to live, not be forced to institutions, and arrange living protections that are theoretically available by virtue of a Supreme Court decision, but are not actually implemented, and we run into it all the time. So that's a handful. We can talk about it more afterwards. We'll all be here.
Can I also just jump in super quick?
Sure.
I just wanted to let everybody know that, and I apologize for the lighting, the sun is setting outside my house. I'm 3 hours later than you, but in terms of understanding the human impact of a lot of what's going on right now, that's where the Rooted in Rights blog can really come in handy. I highly recommend having a look through, as much as you can to understand. We're not just talking about qualitative or statistical information here. We're talking about the real human lives that are going to be impacted by some of this legislation. So that's a great resource to get a better grasp on some of what's going on right now.
Nice, Mike. Over here.
I realize this may sound trivial compared to some of the things we've been talking about. Obviously, since I'm speaking, I don't think it is. I'm wondering if there's any way that you can help bring to attention the fact that the film that's coming out called He Won't Get Far on Foot, about the writer and cartoonist John Callahan, the subject of that film is going to be portrayed by Joaquin Phoenix, who of course does not have a disability. And meanwhile, in Hollywood, there are tons of actors who do have disabilities and could perfectly well play that role. So, I mean, I don't know what anyone else is doing. I'm making plans to picket the damn movie.
Anybody want to react to that one? Do you guys know about that film?
Well, I would love to say that if you are interested, if writing is your thing, or if you know somebody who shares your views and writing is their thing, let's write about it. I know that one blog post is not going to spark systemic change necessarily, but I think that the more that we talk about the issues of representation, and we have had that on the blog before, and break down why it's so important to have disabled people representing ourselves in film and television, the more that we get media like that out there, the better chance we have of seeing the tides turn. And so the best way to fight back is to put your opinion out there, not just by picketing in front of one particular leader, although that's a huge move forward in the right direction, but also to articulate these thoughts to get other people to come over and understand what it is that we're talking about. And so that is an issue that I personally value very deeply and know that a lot of my colleagues feel similarly. So we'd love to have that perspective shared on our screen for sure.
I just wanted to mention something real quick. I do remember that Alice Wong recently wrote a fantastic piece on this particular issue as a whole, not just about that specific film, but it has been a problem for a long, long time. And I would encourage if another thing that you can do is a simple share of of content that we have on our Facebook page that talks about that issue, because when you share that, shares with your entire network of friends on social media, and someone else might share it, and that just really causes a chain reaction of sharing that information and getting that issue out there.
I think the statistic is for all of the disabled characters portrayed in film and television, 2% are portrayed by actors with disability. So this is so far out of whack. Very few people are paying attention to it, but Alice and others are talking about it now. It's really important.
We wouldn't accept a white actor portraying a black person, so why do we accept this?
Other questions? Here's someone up front. And this is going to be our last question for today, and then we'll, of course, be in the room to chat with you afterwards.
Well, thank you for great presentations. This is addressed to Vanessa on the comments you made about some work to defend the rights of people with disabilities in the prison system. Could you expand on that a little bit?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Something about the prison system and people with disabilities?
Yeah, if you would just say a little more about that. You referred to it, but I'm interested to know how those issues are presented, in what, who you're targeting.
My job to make the discussion guides was to really just kind of summarize some of the information. So from what I got from the documentary is that people with disabilities are not treated very well at all in institutions, in correctional institutions. Specifically, there was one of the inmates that we call Kara had a hip replacement, I believe, right, and had received any physical therapy at all. And another inmate was prone to psychological episodes and was often put in isolation that would exacerbate his mental illness and just make them worse. And another man was blind and was given a belt on the top without a ladder, I think, and then they would turn the lights off, and he was just very lost and disoriented. I think probably I'm not the best person to talk about this because I just think the discussion time. But did that help to answer your question?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, folks, so that concludes our presentation. I want to encourage you to chat with the folks here who are here today. Please sign up for our email list or follow us on social media. We're at Rooted in Rights on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find us on the web at rootedinrights.org. Please visit the table in the other room to take action today. And I really want to thank Seattle Women Marching Forward for the invitation to be here today. And it was an incredible pleasure of mine to introduce you to some of the fine women I work with every single day. Thank you very much.